Hi, everybody, and welcome to the sixth webinar of the PLP Pathways 2018-2019 webinar series. My name is Don Taylor, and as we begin, I'd like to remind people that the purpose of PLP Pathways is to support teachers around the state of Vermont who are implementing personalized learning and elements of Act 77 into their practice. I'd like to thank the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education and the Middle Grades Collaborative for supporting this work. And tonight we're going to be talking about flexible pathways, microcredentialing, and how to build community partnerships. Before I go any further, I'd like each of our contributors to introduce themselves, and then we'll get going.
Hi, I'm Meg O'Donnell. I teach on the Alpha team at Shelburne Community School.
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I'm the proficiency-based learning and technology integration coach at Lamoille South.
And I'm Lindsey Hallman, and I'm a program director with Up for Learning.
So again, today we're going to be talking about flexible pathways. And for those of you who have been following along, flexible pathways we consider to be one of the three foundational pillars of personalized learning, along with proficiency-based learning and assessment and personal learning plans. And according to the Agency of Education, flexible pathways are any combination of high quality, expanded learning opportunities, including academic and experiential components, which build and assess attainment of proficiencies and lead to secondary school completion, civic engagement, and post-secondary readiness. And flexible pathways, there's two parts of it, at least, that I look at as a classroom teacher. One is the in-classroom opportunities that we're giving kids, and the second one is the sort of community-based or out-of-the-classroom experiences. So I think flexible pathways can be utilized by almost all teachers. And when the Agency of Education discusses flexible pathways in their official language, they're talking about things like blended learning, they're talking about virtual learning, community-based learning, dual enrollment, and early college. And at the middle level, where I am, we don't really get into too much of the dual enrollment or the early college, but we're very interested in using technology for blended learning and virtual learning, and also to have community-based flexible pathways. And one thing that we'll talk about in a little bit is also when you have community-based flexible pathways, it doesn't always mean that you're going out to the community. You can often have the community coming into your classroom, which can be a much more effective way of getting kids exposure to those opportunities, especially with regard to logistical issues. So just really quickly, I'd like our panelists to maybe talk about how they view what flexible pathways are, and maybe also the benefits that they've seen when flexible pathways are utilized inside the classroom or with their educational organization. And so we'll start with Meg. And Meg, what do you think about flexible pathways, and how does that look in your classroom?
Yeah, so Don, I think on one level of flexible pathways, initially around this idea of goal setting and personalization through setting goals, gathering evidence of those goals, connecting my learning to bigger ideas related to the transferable skills or what used to be the vital results, and having students practice this idea of setting their sights on something and taking action steps to achieve that something, whatever it might be, or whatever that scale might be. So it might be as simple as a goal setting practice, I'm going to work on reading a variety of genres, to it might be something around a leadership goal that they might have about taking advantage of opportunities in their community or outside of school. So it's not something that's just limited to the experiences that happen in the classroom, but it could be beyond that. So when we set goals with students at our November conference and sit down with them in March or April to review the progress on that, I think of that as one level of flexible pathways. I don't know that that's like the most, well, no judgment. That's one way. in the last 2 years here at Shelburne Community School, we've also been doing these personal interest projects, which have been with the idea of trying to get, thank you, buddy. Thank you so much. Of trying to get students to think about their learning related to a personal interest that they might have. And again, following action steps to achieve a skill, to learn a new idea, or to create. So it's sort of like that idea of that head, hand, heart idea. So that's another means of flexible pathways that we try here at school.
Okay. So it sounds like when you think about flexible pathways, you're thinking about how kids can reach proficiency using different avenues within your own classroom.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maura?
Within my work, I've been doing a lot of work with our high schools around flexible pathway opportunities, so kind of specific to the high school. And we have, both individualized studies, community-based learning, students who take VTVLC classes. We have dual enrollment classes in our high school, and we have students who participate in early college, and then also thinking about work-based learning and all those pieces. And when I think about what's the overarching thing that unifies all of those things, is really honoring that learning can happen anytime and anywhere. And by honoring flexible pathways, it honors that students learn in different ways and gain skills in different ways, and many of them are doing these things anyways. And so how do we honor the skills that students are developing within a variety of different ways? So, at the high school level, it's sort of defined, I think. At the middle level, I think, as you were mentioning, there's both those in-school opportunities and the out-of-school opportunities. But I think as teachers, we need to really be thinking about how are we providing those in-school opportunities for students to really drive. And so those are just sort of some of the pieces. And it's connected to developing academic proficiency skills, transferable skills. And so really honoring all the different ways that learners collect those skills, and recognizing that, students' mastery doesn't depend on seat time. And so their experiences can give that evidence of mastery. And that word evidence I don't necessarily like, but can help them to acquire those skills for mastery.
Okay, that sounds really good. And as you're talking about these high school opportunities, you talked about work-based learning and dual enrollment. As a middle level teacher, I am wondering, and this would be the question I have, is what can I do at the middle level to prepare kids for those types of opportunities? So as you're observing kids who are taking college classes, what skills how do we figure out what skills we can be helping them practice at the middle level in order to make them successful? And then the other thing I think that viewers should be aware of is there's a big issue of equity. Like, how do we make sure that all the kids, and sometimes the kids who need it most, have the same opportunities as kids who are, really aware or really plugged into our educational system? So how do we make sure that all these kids have the chance to engage in these activities? And maybe that's something we can talk about a little bit later too, is the skills required. Lindsey, you want to talk about the flexible pathways, how you view it?
Sure. I don't have too much more to add. I think Maura and Meg really articulated it very well, especially for the middle level, what it looks like. I mean, the flexible pathways legislation, Act 77, is kind of a gift to both middle level and high school, in that, by sitting and developing relationships with all of our students, I think that's the only piece I would add. The and part would be that it really comes down to how much time do we devote to the relationships and getting to know our individual students and supporting them in their goal setting, as Meg talked about, and then using those opportunities to really support them in developing their own path to demonstrate proficiency. And so not much more to add to that, because I think you both covered it really well. I just would say that what are the structures in our school that allow for us to really truly sit and have those conversations where we're getting at like authentic goal setting that is, done well, and then is seen through, and that all learners are supported with that, especially around issues regarding equity when it comes to like personal interest projects and genius hours and pieces like that. Those are all great in theory, but if we don't provide those opportunities so that everyone has access to whatever they want to explore based on their goals, then we're not truly doing all students, we're not supporting all students.
I think those are really good points. And especially, I like how you talk about that authentic goal setting and how important that is to build those relationships. And I also know, Lindsey, that you're a huge proponent of family engagement. And so this is, I think, an area also where folks need to think about, bringing the family into those conversations. And what are your thoughts about how, family engagement and flexible pathways, Lindsey?
Yeah, I think that, well, first and foremost, that our students' families have to be at the table or part of the conversation in some way around their child's goals and hopes and dreams, and so finding ways to make sure that those pieces are communicated and that families are wrapped into that. And then I would say that ensuring that there is ongoing communication around connecting the goals to the learning experience, which which also, not being very articulate, connects to the proficiencies, and being able to explain that to their families, I think, is a way to really solidify the learning. So whether that's like the weekly reflections that we've talked about before, or the Monday memos, whatever it is, I think supporting the learners in being really clear about what they're learning, how they're learning it, and why they're learning it, so they can explain it to their family, to their peers, to any audience is really important. So finding different ways, because I just don't think we can say family engagement, flexible pathways means that kids who have parents that can drive them into the community to like meet with an expert is flexible pathways. That cannot be what it is. So I think we have to be really careful about that. That can be potentially damaging for many other kids who don't have those opportunities. So how do we ensure that we're engaging families so that they understand the learning that's occurring, and we're providing the support for all learners within our own setting?
I just want to, I've been thinking a lot about Dawn, the question that you asked, what can we do at the middle level to get students ready for high school opportunities? And thinking about the way that we talk to students and their families about the opportunities in high school, starting really early, starting it at the middle level, and thinking about, we talk a lot about charting the way, if a student is on a college track, like what are the steps, what are the paths that you're going to take to get there? And I think we need to also be thinking about how are we creating our path from middle school to high school? What are those potential opportunities that could be there? And I think a lot about, creating community partners at the middle level. So kind of this is going a little bit beyond just the families, but the number of students, we have some community partners at some of our middle levels. One at People's Academy in the 6th grade, they do an internship every year, and they go out into the field, and it's called Maple Leaf. It's been happening forever. And last year was my first year really looking at high school course loads, and the number of students who went back to those internship places that they had in the 6th grade to do either community-based learning or an individualized studies or something like that later, it was huge in the same placement. And what I take away from that was, what experiences are we giving kids to try something new and to go places? So how are we creating familiar spaces within our communities for our kids to go? And so having those community partners at the middle level, it makes a student say, I could go there, or maybe I could try that thing, or they were really nice to me when I was a 6th grader. I could probably go back there. And so, I think doing those sorts of things and talking in those ways, it helps to open the door, because in my thinking, it's really about experiences. The more experiences that we can give kids, the safer they feel taking a risk. And so, my mind keeps spinning about that. And that's the work of our middle level teachers and our elementary teachers, just sort of keeping those connections going for kids.
More, can I jump in on that? Because I think just pulling from a conversation that I had with Stan Williams the other day about how we provide kids opportunities for practicing in the proficiencies. And he used this term of play.
Yes.
And it keeps coming up for us as we're planning our units and planning our activities for kids, is that low stakes, but high engagement and high opportunity for kids to just play in something. And I've noticed it in setting up these personal interest projects with kids, that they feel that there's a pressure there, that somehow I'm supposed to have this like incredible PIP experience, and I'm supposed to like have this project that's going to blow the socks off everybody. And it's like, no, this is just about you, like finding something, creating experiences around it. And it just makes me think more and more about how can we restructure the PIP so that there is for low stakes, low stakes, high engagement to explore. I would love to hear more. Maybe if there's a resource or something that you have about that 6th grade community partnerships, because that sounds really cool.
I think I'm sort of still reflecting on this, but I think the other piece is helping students to truly know who they are. Like, what are the experiences that we provide students to think about their identity and who they are as a learner, and giving them opportunities to drive their learning. Because that's a skill, like being able to advocate for yourself, being self-directed, like those are skills that we need to help kids build intentionally. I think a lot about the connections to a lot of the social emotional work that we do, and talking to kids about like, how do you think about your thinking? What motivates you? Because that's what sustains kids. And also in saying like, this might be really hard, but I think I could do it. As opposed to saying, oh, I might not. The other piece about it is, I think it's important the way that we talk about flexible pathway opportunities, because there's not like, oh, these are the these are the community-based learning kids, and these are the independent study kids. I think we have to be really careful, because it's for all kids, and it's not just kids who are on one track or who a traditional classroom doesn't work for. And so we have to be building that culture at our school and how we talk about these things, starting young. I'm kind of like processing.
Yeah, I agree with all those pieces, Maura, and I would add, and to like piggyback on what Meg was saying from her conversation around playing, when I was working with the Edge Academy, we would have times where experts would come in either into our community, or we would go out to the community, and everyone would have those shared experiences, because we needed to support everyone in kind of stepping outside of their comfort zone and maybe trying out something new or connecting with their passion. But we ensure that everyone had that time to play with something, just to kind of see. Maybe I always said, that's not for me, coding or archaeology or whatever it is, soil science. But after having this experience, maybe now I can see myself doing something, around that, to explore that further. So we always had these like touch points where everyone had these opportunities. And then we also had these projects where the kids would develop these long-term projects based on their interests, passions, and the connections to the curriculum. And then they would reach out, having had this experience already with community members coming in and going out to the community. They felt more comfortable reaching out to have those experiences either on their own or in small groups. So I agree. It's kind of a both. You have to have that play in order to know what you don't know, figure out what you don't know, and see if maybe it feels okay. Try it out. And then you also have to provide opportunities for all kids to be able to make connections based on their goals, their interests.
So that was a lot of really great information, and I'm trying to process it all as more is. And I just want to go back, like, as I'm listening to you guys, I'm writing down some big pieces. And I think I want to start out with what Lindsey just said about the identity, about giving, and Maura mentioned this too, but giving kids opportunities to see themselves in ways that they might not have before. So a kid might be exposed to, somebody said computer programming, and say, oh, maybe I could be a computer engineer. Or a kid can go to one of the regional tech centers and say, I'm really interested in this, and how maybe I could be, maybe I could be a diesel, whatever the case may be. But giving those kids all that, all those experiences, and I've always been a big believer in having these organizations start by coming into the school. And I also want to mention that I think it's really important, as Maura was talking about that Maple project, that it's really important for me to sustain my community partnerships. So for example, when I started working with the Vermont Energy Education Program about 6 or 7 years ago, and teachers out there need to know that these organizations want to work with students, and they also have a ton of resources available. So VEEP is a really important organization. I think Lindsey, Cultivating Sustainable Pathways to Sustainability, and Shelburne Farms, they have a ton of stuff for kids. And developing these sustained community partnerships will help teachers develop even more resources. And then I do want to go back to this idea of allowing kids to explore. One of the things that we do on their personal learning plan is we have an exploration page. And I used to say, hey, let's go look at colleges. And talking to a 7th grader about college, it's very difficult to make that real. So instead, we brought it back and we started looking at camps or local workshops and local opportunities, because the kid can say to themselves, ooh, summer is closer, right? And I can imagine going to these camps, and there's a ton of camps around Vermont that are not just about sports or about the outdoors. There's a ton of camps of engineering and coding and all sorts of opportunities. And I think that Lindsey's right. We need to make sure that all of our kids have those opportunities on a regular basis so that they can see what's available and what's out there. And then I also want to go back to this idea of communicating to families. In the way I look at it, it often seems that the same parents get all of the opportunities or know about all the opportunities, whether they're on Facebook or whether they're in the PTO. They're connected and they're concerned, and that's good. But what about the parents who, might be working at night, or the parents who are not that connected to the school? How can we make sure they understand the opportunities that are available to them too? And especially, as Maura mentioned, going through the transition period from middle level to high school, like how are we supporting kids going through that transition period? And I guess Maura, and I'd like to ask the panel, what do you think are key elements of a transition that are going to support kids who are looking at or seeking flexible pathways? Like, what are some of the things that you guys are doing in your classroom to support your learners or the organizations you work with to support flexible pathways? Meg?
Yeah. So I'm not as well versed, I don't think, in the community partner component. Like we've worked with Champlain Valley, or no, Chittenden Solid Waste to do some auditing of some trash, and with the goal of that leading to some projects that will come out of that. But I'm actually struggling to find a way to keep the momentum going on that, and I'm not. I don't know if that was what you were asking. Like, what are some strategies that people have to do that?
Well, I guess the other question I have is, so your kids are feeding into CVU, right?
Correct.
So you're Shelburne. So how do kids become aware of the opportunities that are available at CVU? Like, do they have the chance to do that in your classroom? Are there programs for them to do that?
Not necessarily. I mean, certainly the 8th graders start thinking about it now. They come and, CVU comes here in January, and they do that whole transition to high school. And there's some summer camps for kids that are the first sort of generation going to CVU, if they don't have a sibling that's already up there, and it's available for anybody. And we have great, guidance conversations, and there's opportunities to go up there, but there's not, at least my understanding, which is limited, necessarily a liaison in any particular way between those learning opportunities that might happen from middle school to high school. I don't know that.
Yeah,
they're out there. I'd like to know about it.
Maura, what are you seeing for those?
As we're having this conversation, it's interesting because I'm reflecting on, how we do talk about it with kids. I think, I'm not sure what it looks like as a part of the transition at the moment. And so it's something that based on our conversation, I think I want to go back and sort of learn a little bit more about what's happening to then think about what some potential next steps could be. Because it also feels like right now, and I think it always will, that flexible pathway opportunities are fluid, which they, I think it's a reflection of what kids want, or, because it is driven by students. And so how do we create systems for communicating something that is fluid, so that we're not missing out on sharing it?
Like I think about, so we're using Protean, and the high school's using Protean. And so I think there's an opportunity there, but we haven't done anything yet to really tap into that, or to know how to use that really well as a communication between middle and high school. So over the next year or two, that'll be kind of cool to sort of figure it out, but it'd be nice to to anticipate that and maybe be intentional about it, as opposed to sort of waiting to see it.
I have a question from the field.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
That kind of fits with some of the things that we were talking about. But if the question is, it's in two parts. The first one is, how do teachers begin finding community partners to work with in order to enhance student learning? And then let's just start there, and then I'll ask the follow-up question. So how do you begin finding community partners to work with?
I can take that one first. Yeah. So I think that, first of all, being in a community, you just automatically, you look at your neighbors, and it's like, who are the people that make up this community, and what are their skills and talents, and what can they share with the students. And so that to me seems like pretty straightforward, whether you're in a school that has a downtown and you can walk there or not. And I wasn't in a school that had a town around it at all. It was we couldn't walk to the local businesses, you start there, and then you start branching out. And also we have so much technology in our schools. Like, you start doing some research, local, whatever. And you work on crafting professional emails, and you reach out. You have students reach out after they've written emails and talking about what it is that they are interested in exploring. But we also are lucky in Vermont to have so many folks that are so willing to give of themselves and their time. And when you reach out and say, hey, would you be willing to come in and share what you're doing? Or could we come to you? Or could you meet us out in the woods? Or whatever it is, people are more than happy to share what they're doing with young people. And I think they're often very grateful for folks reaching out to them. So I think it just really starts with like looking directly at like, who are the people that I know? You know, I mean, Vermont, everyone is so connected in so many ways. And then those people know, you know, some ideas, and you just keep asking. And I think we sometimes get siloed into our schools and think that everything, you know, exists in this building, and that is not the case. I think if we just open up to who are the people that are, you know, surrounding the community, like think of community as a larger piece. And then also community doesn't have to just be like within driving distance in Vermont. I mean, looking beyond to like global community, who are the people that, you know, can support our learners in their work and their learning. And again, people are very willing yet to be a little more creative around time zones, to Google Hangout or Skype or whatever it is, do a virtual call so that, you know, you can have the opportunity to connect with them in their place.
Yeah, I would just like to sort of echo what Lindsey's saying. I think I've always been really surprised by how open people have been, and how, you know, I've reached out to people expecting a no and getting a yes. I think more times than not. And I think it's pretty amazing once you start asking, because it's either that person can't do it or that partner can't do it, but they know someone else who could. And so I often find that I meet new people in that way who are interested and have time and talents to offer. One of the things that at one of our middle schools, their theme this year is the pack gives back. They're the wolves, and so the wolf pack gives back. And so in December, they went to all the storefronts in our village and delivered cookies and did the thing. And I think, you know, that's just one step towards building partners with communities, but like getting kids out and having kids be supporters of the organizations that are around us, and doing those things. It's just really great. We have a community service club that goes out, and we've made partners that way. And so, yeah, I've always been really pleasantly surprised by how open people are with their time for students.
I was just going to add that I think it's also, you know, you can start with just your curriculum too, right? So like with your curriculum, you know, I was watching Joe Rivers' videos or his YouTube piece last night that was attached to one of the resources that we have listed on our PLP pathways, and was struck by just how much, you know, he's a humanities teacher, he's a history teacher in Brattleboro, and how much kids were tapping into history of the buildings and through the story, like what are the stories that are local, and sometimes just letting your curriculum guide you a little bit allows, you know, you'll find those resources in that way. You know, it doesn't have to be you know, disconnected to what you're already doing in the classroom.
I just want to jump in there and add too that I totally agree with Meg that some of my community partnerships have come out of theme-based ideas. So this idea of citizenship, we've certainly been working on that for quite a while. And so when you start looking at those themes, what could we do to be better citizens? And that led us to sustainability. That led us to the Vermont Energy Education Program. And then once you're linked in with a program that is designed to support schools, then you end up getting all these secondary programs, including, like for us, Teens Reaching Youth. So we have kids are teaching kids about the environment. We also did a Stop Idling campaign that was through Vermont Energy Education. So sometimes identifying a theme or the needs that you feel your kids, identifying your kids' needs, I think that's really important. And then another one could just be about I like having adults come in and talk to the kids in a way, what were you like in middle school? What was your path? How did you get to where you are? And the other thing that Lindsey mentioned, I think is really important, is this idea of asking your neighbors or actually paying attention to your neighbors. And so one of the things that we do is we walk around Montpelier, and you can start looking. There's a river right here, and now we have a committee that's examining, what the river's doing, and they're linked up with a local organization called I think it's the Winooski River Alliance. And once you start poking around, you find out that there's a ton of different opportunities. And then a great source of interest or resource is the parents. We have a ton of parents who are doing a wide variety of things. And so those are places to start, at least that I've used. Maura, do you have maybe one more question from the field? And then I'd like to just talk real quickly about micro-credentialing, and then we'll sign off.
We actually, through our conversations, have answered all of our questions from the field, I think.
Okay.
So I think we're good.
Okay. So one thing that is sort of, I guess, on the upswing is this idea of micro-credentialing. And micro-credentialing occurs when students, at least this is my understanding of it, is that students independently complete some tasks, and that they reach a proficiency level upon at which time they are given a certificate of achievement, or they are given a credential, or if you're using computers, they're given a badge. And this can be a really effective way of motivating kids, and also allowing for a blended learning model of flexible pathways. And one way that I'm doing that in my classroom is I'm using Google Forms and something called Google Certify-em. And Google Certify-em allows you to award kids a credential or a certificate if they have reached a certain level of proficiency. Now, I'm just piloting the program, and I've been using it for sort of assessments. I'm also piloting it for our sustainability initiative, where kids would be able to get a credential in different areas. For example, they would become a climate scientist if they did some online modules and then took a summative assessment and demonstrated proficiency in that. But there are a lot of folks who are interested in micro-credentialing. And just to throw a number out there, when I asked my students if having the credential motivated them to work hard and achieve it, 89% of the kids said that it did. So this is something, I don't know, educators out there, if you're hearing things about micro-credentialing, you might want to just pay attention, because I'm using it as a supplement to this idea of flexible pathways. And there is a sort of a new website out there called the Vermont Learning Cooperative. And there's a group of people who are working hard on this so that they can develop credentials that would allow people to demonstrate their proficiency in sort of an independent blended learning environment. Are other folks, what's your exposure to the micro-credentials, and what have you heard about it, or do you know anybody who's using them? And we can start with Lindsey maybe, and then we'll start with Maura and then Meg.
I don't know too much about the micro-credentialing, but I think one of the things with flexible pathways is always trying to figure out how does it translate into what students are doing, or what colleges need, or whatever that is. How do we communicate the skills that students have built outside of school or through the flexible pathway opportunities? And so I think this is a really interesting solution to that question.
I don't know of many folks at all yet, but that it's probably just because I haven't asked the right question. I'm super curious about it. I think one of the struggles I have, or just something that's kind of like itching at the back of my head about it, is just our balance constantly of kids being in front of technology. And so like trying to figure out how do we leverage a conversation about something that they've learned with, you know, a badge system. And clearly I don't know enough about it to articulate, you know, to talk about it, but that's just something that I'm wondering about.
Yeah, I would agree with that there's definitely a large technology component, which, I mean, I think the tone of this conversation has basically indicated how important it is to develop interpersonal relationships with not only your students, but families and also community members. The thing about the badging is that it's a way of creating an extended learning opportunity for some kids. And I have experience sort of in my professional development. One is with the Google technology certifications, where you can take modules, and depending on your level of proficiency, you can get certified as a Google educator. And right now I'm actually in the process of the National Geographic Society. You can get certified in that too. And National Geographic actually has a pretty wide assortment of professional development, and most of it is online. And it's just an interesting experience. It's different for sure, but it's an interesting experience. And you can be involved with these organizations and not really have to leave Vermont, which I think is sort of a good thing. But again, as you mentioned, it does have some of those drawbacks where there might not be as much interpersonal connection. So again, that organization is called the Vermont Learning Cooperative. I know they have a new website up there, and you might just people out there might want to take a look at that. We're about out of time. I really appreciate the input and the thoughtful ideas. Maura, your processing got me processing, and I'm hopeful that we can sort of capture some of your ideas, because I think they're important, particularly about this idea of students going back to community partners.
I love that.
Before we leave, can folks tell us a little bit about opportunities that they have on their radar over the next few months, or things that you believe teachers or educators out there should be paying attention to? And again, how about if we start with Lindsey, and then Maura and Meg, and then we'll say goodnight.
I mean, I think the most important piece that's coming up soon is the Family Beyond Bullying Conference on March 13th. And it's going to be at Champlain College all day for youth and adult teams to come and participate in a number of workshops that are primarily youth-led or youth-facilitated or co-facilitated. We have the Woodstock Yo Players as our keynote, doing a spoken word piece, and they're also going to workshop. And then Sound Check, which is a social justice band that is comprised of youth from across Vermont. They're going to be doing our end note of the day, but also doing a workshop. And it's going to be a great day to think about action planning around school culture and climate projects.
Awesome. And is there a way, is that going to be, or any portions of that going to be recorded or live streamed or any of that?
I don't think so. We haven't made a plan for that.
Okay.
Yet on that one.
And that's, Lindsey, what day is that again?
March 13th.
Okay. Excellent. Maura?
I was just looking it up. There's a series of 3 workshops that are coming up by the Vermont Higher Ed.
I'm going to go to that too.
Collaborative, kind of all around equity. And the first one I think is February 14th. So, but I don't have that at my fingers at the moment.
It's a follow-up to Paul Gorski's work in the fall. And I think that it is, I signed up for those as well. It's not February 14th. Maybe it's March 14th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is. I don't know when it is, but they're coming up. They're on the Vermont. Oh, here we go. March 19th is the first one, and it's confronting gender-based inequity in classrooms and schools. And then there's one in April. That's Whose Country Is This? Race, Racism, and Refugee Status in America.
Cool.
April 12th. And then May is Strategies for Erasing the Opportunity Gap.
And Lindsey, can teachers take those singly, or do they have to sign up for the series?
I don't know. Maura, can they take them single?
I think that you can take them singly.
Okay.
Okay, and so let's make sure we post those out on our social media pages, because those sound really good. And I know that Gorski's book is really good, and that sounds like a great opportunity for folks. Meg, how about you? Anything on the radar?
Yeah, no, Don, I was just going to talk about the family conference. That's all I got.
All right. Again, everybody, I really appreciate your contributions and your thoughtful conversation. We're PLP Pathways. You can find us on YouTube. Our webinars, our next webinar is actually March 14th at 3:30. But you can find us on Twitter, and you can also find us on Blogger. And this work is supported by the Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute. And thank you very much. I hope you all have a safe travel home this evening, and enjoy. It's getting lighter out, believe it or not, in the afternoon, which is exciting.
And the ice skating. The ice skating is great.
That's awesome.
Been good.
All right, guys. Have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Bye.